Most ministry leaders spend years thinking about how they will eventually leave their ministry, but very few imagine it happening like this. At age 54, Dennis Atwood was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease. And for years, he carried the diagnosis quietly while continuing to pastor and preach, lead, and serve the people that he loved. But eventually, the disease began to take things from him. His voice, his mobility, his independence, and ultimately the ministry he thought he would leave on his own terms. So this is a hard conversation, and it's a conversation about grief and loss, identity, and what happens when life takes a turn you never would have chosen. But it's also a conversation about gratitude, faithfulness, and discovering that even when much is taken away, God's presence remains. It's one of the more tender conversations that we've had on the podcast. So thanks for checking in. This is the Life After Ministry Podcast. Dennis Atwood, thanks for being on the Life After Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity.
We were introduced through a mutual friend and somebody who was just recently on the podcast. Anytime I have somebody on the podcast, we always send a follow-up on the day that the episode drops and says, who do you know? That would also be, has a story to share. And Andrew, right away said, you got to talk to Dennis. He has an incredible story. And what I have read so far, Andrew was right. So let's start here. You've been a pastor. You've been in ministry. You have a lot of degrees. So you're a smart dude. But you've been in the South, and most recently you're a North Carolina guy. But how long have you been leading churches?
I started out in Mississippi, Louisiana, the Deep South, and then went to St. Louis, Missouri for about 7 years, pastored there. I was finishing my doctorate, and then moved to Eastern North Carolina, was here 22 years as a pastor, same church. And that was not planned, but it's the way it went, and we had a good run here.
So I'm going to just kind of cut to the chase with your story. Sometimes I have people on here that I'll ask the question, do you feel like you were pushed or pulled out of ministry? Was the Lord pulling you into something else? Did you just get unceremoniously dropped and blindsided? But illness is part of your story. You got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and that changed everything. Let's start with, how did you figure out what was going on at the time that you started to feel like something's not right?
I was in my early 50s, and I had just a little twinge of a tremor on one of my fingers. And that led me to explore what was going on with that, and to my doctor, and he said, that didn't look good. We need to move you to a specialist. And so I ended up going to a specialist at UNC Chapel Hill, and movement disorder specialist. At the age of 54, I was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease, and that was something I didn't know a lot about it. To be honest with you, it's just a matter of thinking that old people got it when they were in their 70s or 80s, and it happened with shakes and tremors. But long story short, that's when I got the diagnosis, and I held it to myself for about 6 or 7 years because I didn't have my symptoms were under control with some medications. But then I just kind of went off a cliff about the age of 60, and started having more symptoms emerge and couldn't hide them. So finally went to the church about, actually it was about 2.5 years ago, and said, this is what I've got. I sent a letter out to the whole congregation.
Now, you're getting to the punchline real quick for me, so I want to slow down a little bit on the story.
Right, sure.
You find out that you have Parkinson's. You have a doctor, and he's giving you it's semi under control for a good period of time. For 7 years, you make the decision that you're going to keep it basically between yourself and your wife, inner circle family, essentially. But
Right.
for 7 years, 7.5 years, it was not. You didn't bring it to the board. You didn't bring it to the church. You were quietly just kind of taking care of it. How did you make that decision to do that?
I guess I'm stubbornly independent. But other than that, it's just a matter of I didn't want. I felt it would be a clergy killer or a career killer. You know, nobody wants to hire a guy with Parkinson's disease, and so that was why I felt like couldn't share it. And that's unfortunate. You would think you could share the deepest things in your life with church, but I felt like it would be the end of my career, and I just didn't want to go through that with people, and so I wanted to have some control over where my life was going for as long as I could.
Were there Sunday mornings where you're preaching and you start to feel certain things, and there's a nervousness or a fear that you might not be able to control what your body's doing in any given moment?
Yeah, my voice was affected pretty quickly, and I used to have a deep baritone voice that was very smooth, but believe it or not, but it was a matter of the main things I couldn't do. Eventually, my speech was going fast, and I couldn't stop. And people were asking, "I can't understand you." And I knew that was the beginning of the end. Then I couldn't physically go visit people in the hospitals. I didn't realize how long hospital corridors were till then, and it was a matter of people knew something was different about me, and so I finally had to come clean and say this is what's going on.
Can you, I mean, obviously, most everybody listening here, we've never experienced Parkinson's. Like internally in your body, what does it feel like?
It's a neurological disorder, so it's something that your brain is not able to connect with the right muscles or the right places of your body that need to be these that you never thought about before, like walking, talking, rigidity, stiffness, freezing of the gait, which means your feet just stop moving. So you have a risk of falls and things that you don't normally associate with young. I consider myself young at the age of 52, 54, but people get Parkinson as early as in the 30s. Michael J. Fox has had it for 35 or so years. But I was under the impression that it was going to be a long journey, that I would have plenty of time to sort of plan out my retirement. And then it would hit me about 70, 75 when I couldn't do things like I used to do. I was under the illusion that I was able to do that, but I couldn't do it. It went pretty quickly, and it's just something that really, gets at your ego and your pride to not be able to do. Like we lived next to a golf course. I used to go out and hit balls every night, every evening. My decompression time, but I can't do that anymore. So it hits you right where you have a lot of personal things that you can't do it like you used to do, and there's always a danger of falling. And I'm not always understood with my speech, so it's just a humbling kind of experience physically.
Yeah. When you come out and you talk to the board and this comes out with the church, what's their response? Did they say, I mean, were they, when you're telling them, do you say like, I can do this for another 2 weeks and I'm done? Or are you saying like, hey, let's try to figure out what this transition looks like over the next year or two?
The way I handled it was I sent a letter and I said I'd like to be pastor as long as possible, physically, but it just deteriorated so quickly that I couldn't. I knew I couldn't hold out, and it was probably about 6 months that I had to plan the transition and just get kind of my head wrapped around it and trying to help them to be as least disruptive as possible to the life of the congregation. So I had a good friend that just retired recently, and I had him come in and preach with me a few times, and then he became their transitional pastor for about a year and a half.
Mm.
So, and then I was just kind of people were very sympathetic and very supportive, but nobody knows what to do with that. So, it's very, very intense time personally, and just emotional time to not have control over how you exit the ministry and enter retirement. So, enter retirement, I thought I would never be missing the church. I'd never be missing my vocation.
Yeah.
But I did.
And I don't ask this in any way to throw rocks at the elder board. Did the process of that transition with the board and like how they handled severance and that process, was there anything in that you wish went differently?
Not really, but I think it was as best as it could. They offered me a severance package, and I took it rather than. I went through a deep brain stimulation surgery, which is called DBS for short, but that was about 2 months after I announced my condition, and that was something that helps a lot of people beat back their symptoms. And I was hoping it was going to do that for me, but it didn't. So went through that in November of 2024. So I knew January of 2025 that I was not going to be able to, kind of jump back from that and get back to my duties. And I accepted their severance package and moved on. I said that would be the best thing to do for me and the church.
Yeah.
So.
You said that leaving full-time ministry was more difficult than you'd expected. You had quite a runway leading up to it, so you were anticipating it. And even then, it was difficult. So what was your, you said, I kind of hoped that I'd go till 70, 75 till I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
What was the surprise? Because you had the anticipation of this is not going to last forever, but what surprised you in that transition?
Well, I think the reality that you need a role to play in life, and I think this missed the role of being pastor, being person that was leading a group of people in a direction of the kingdom of God and doing things that mattered in community. And I think that was a hard thing to let go of. So didn't think it would be, but I thought I'd never miss being a pastor, but I did pretty quickly, and that surprised me. So I thought I'd be able to transition from that a little bit easier, but it's a built-in community that you got. You move around as a pastor, move into a town, and you have immediate community involved in your life with your church. When you don't have that role of pastor, staff member, whatever, then you're kind of loosened, and you don't have connectedness like you need to have. You have to find your own people. It was a different way of living at that point, and so I think that that surprised me. I wasn't ready for that, and I'm about a year and a half out from retirement, but still adjusting to that reality.
Yeah. What was the process like in talking with your wife about all of this and thinking things through with her? How's that changed your relationship? I imagine that there's some dependency and asking more of her in this season.
Yeah, she turned into a caregiver, but she's still working and she's teaching. So we're making tons of money as pastor and teacher. of course.
Of course.
That's a reality of retirement that we weren't exactly ready for financially. So,
Yeah.
part of the deal, but she's been a great caregiver and, supportive. Didn't ask for anything more. So,
Yeah. Um, were there emotions that surprised you in the process, that like something just bubbles up to the surface? I know one of the things that you talk about is a holy discontent, and I'm curious for you, what that phrase means.
yeah, it's been a lot of surprises in the way of, just, um, grieving the loss, uh, physically as well as spiritually, being again not involved in leading like I would like to lead. So I'm thinking that my only voice right now is just in writing, so that's what I've done. But the holy discontent idea comes from Paul, where Paul talks about being content in all circumstances to Christ. Then he talks about he needs uh, he needs to not worry anymore about the helper that's sent to him, and he sends him back to the church of Philippi, I think. So it's like having a rock in your shoe, where you know that you want to living a life of meaning and purpose means that you don't always have the contentment inside, but if you choose your contentment inside, how you do that outside, it's inward and outward. So I think it's holy discontent means that you gotta have you can have an inward sense of peace with Christ, but you also have to have an outward sense of purpose in uh, doing for others. It makes it true gratitude and true contentment. So it's a kind of sounds like an oxymoron. That's much of what we do in Christian life, anyways. I gotta be happy and upset at the way things are. Yeah, you be content with Christ, but yet you're upset with the way life is around you and the way life is treating others. So you have to love your neighbor as yourself. That's part of the deal, I think, of gratitude.
So you've brought up the word gratitude. You wrote a book called Choosing Gratitude. What inspired the writing of that, and what's the story you're trying to tell? I've not had a chance to read it yet.
Well, it's not a book I wanted to write, but it's a book I had to write because I think it was something that helped me get through the first year of this, dealing with this disease publicly. And I wanted to write it so that people would know that you can have uh, peace with God, but you also got to be upset with the way things are when things are not um, right around you. And so that's the theme of the book is that we're all on those lines. But I want to mention we ironically, I had an opportunity in the church to do something that I dreamed up called the Gratitude Project about 2 or 3 years before I had to retire. We ended up putting $100,000 into our community through grants that we put to nonprofits. And it's kind of innovative, and it was designed to go to the poorest parts of our community. So that was something that I was proud of being able to do before I retired, but it just inspired me to do some writing about how personally we see gratitude, but we often have a gap between personal gratitude and outward transformation in the community. So uh, there's a gap there, and I think it's one that we've had pronounced in many ways today because we see Christians who are so inwardly focused on me and my family and our contentment and our happiness, but they leave out the world around them, the community around them. It's not being served in many ways, and so I wanted to try to bring those two together: the personal gratitude and the outward expression of that gratitude as a part of our Christianity and faith.
Did you ever have forks in the road where you didn't want to choose gratitude? Has there been anger? What's your relationship with God been like in the midst of all of this?
Very, very intense at sometimes. Some days are better than others, but certainly have. I start the book by confessing that preachers often preach about topics that they themselves struggle with the most. And so maybe that's the heart of the book, is that I struggle with gratitude, being grateful every day. So I would need to write about it and share about it and be honest about it, so that others should be maybe inspired or aspired to do things that benefit others, because that's the way that you really come out of ingratitude, is you do things for others in this way. I think that I tried to model it and frame it in the book, is that the real biblical gratitude is one that is experienced personally and very intensely, but also has to be done in the community, in the context of loving your neighbor. And that's something that we aren't very good at right now. We don't know how to do that very well in our country. So in a lot of ways you can take off on that.
I'm working on a book on the dark night of the soul. I don't know if you've read St. John of the Cross, The Dark Night.
I've been there with him, yeah.
And the wilderness season for me is very compelling, because I think it's the place that God meets us.
Yeah.
You can move. Walter Brueggemann, he talks about this transition that we go from orientation to disorientation.
Yeah.
And there is no going back to orientation. There's only reorientation. Right. But he has this quote, and it's like one of the easiest things for me to pull up on my phone, because I come back to it often. I'd just love for you to hear it and then tell me like how that's been lived out and how you process this. But this is Walt Brueggemann. He says, "What is promised in this covenant is not equilibrium, but faithfulness."
Right.
The Bible is realistic in knowing that life does not consist in pleasant growth to well-being, but it consists in painful wrenchings and surprising gifts. And over none of them do we preside.
Yeah.
What sticks out for you in that?
Well, over none of them do we preside. It's a sense of control that we think we have. It's an illusion. And I think we are deluded by that. As ministers, often we can lead the way through anything, and there's a sense of liminality, the word that means in between.
Yeah. Space
in between. And that's where I think I'm at a lot, is that space in between. And we think we Americans can we pull our bootstraps high enough, we can do anything we want to. We can change anything we want to. But it's not happening very well in our country right now. And churches are in a mess. I think we need to reflect more on the reality of the dark night of the soul is something that's probably essential for us to go through. And we're all, if we're honest with God in our community right now, what we're going through, I think we have to be able to say that we're open to being reoriented, because we're very disoriented right now, I would say, as a church, and individually. Often that's where I'm at, is disorientation, but there's reorientation that has to take place too. That's resurrection and hope, and I'm hoping big on that for sure.
Yeah.
But I think we need to read more people like St. John of the Cross and Walter Brueggemann, and people who are challenging us to think deeply and beyond the confines of our ability to control what happens to us and what we can do in terms of making a difference in the world, because making a difference in the world may look different in the kingdom of God as opposed to what we think it should look like in the church.
Yeah.
Somebody once said Jesus came preaching the kingdom, and we created the church. So that goes back to the lack of control that we have. And there's a prayer of Thomas Merton that I often go back to, where he says, find it here, if you heard it, the prayer of unknowing by Thomas Merton. He says, I have no idea, my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not know the way ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so, but I believe there's a desire to please you, does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road. Though I may know that nothing about it, therefore I will trust you always. Though I may seem to be lost in the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. You're ever with me. You will lead me, never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen.
Amen.
So that's been a very important guiding prayer for me to realize that, St. John of the Cross is one that got it, who's realized that we go through the shadow, the valley of the shadow of death, and this liminality that we don't know how long it's going to last. One day we'll go through it and we'll get through the other side. I think the more we can live in that liminality, the more we'll grow. But it's not a fun place to be at all.
No.
It's disorienting. So, as you said,
what would you say to a pastor, or even, we work with nonprofits and really anybody who's a Christian that's encountering some kind of transition, right? What do you say to them when their ministry ends before they were ready for it to end? Somebody's coming to you and they have the same diagnosis or something is about to stop. What piece of advice do you give them?
Welcome to the club, and it's not a fun place to be, but this life is short, and we don't have a lot of control when you really get down to it. So I think that the more we live awake with that reality, the more we actually live. So I'd rather walk through this life with my eyes fully open than to be captured by an illusion that's not real and not instant passing. I think Christ shows us the way that we're suffering. So why would we think that we were above Christ? We could go through times of suffering. But when you're in it, it's not enjoyable. It's not something that you choose because you want to be there. But I think that's where God has found a lot in this time of suffering and loss, being out of your control, and that's an opportunity to really grow deeply in your relationship with God.
Well, Dennis, the book is called Choosing Gratitude. I imagine we can get it on Amazon and maybe just Amazon or all over the place.
It's all over the place. It's marketsquarebooks.com, Amazon, Cokesbury, Barnes & Noble, the whole thing.
Got it. So, and if somebody's stirred and moved by you and your story, they want to connect, how can somebody get a hold of you?
All right, my email is the best right now. It's dennisratwood@gmail.com. DNNISR Atwood, ATWOOD.com, gmail.com.
And I'll drop that in the notes there. Dennis, my prayers for you, for your wife, in the season of transition, in the season of disorientation, that God would be found merciful, that he would be found good, even in the midst of a trying and difficult season, and for the community of people who listen to this podcast. We want to hold you up in prayer. And I'm appreciative and grateful. I'm grateful for you sharing your story. I think it gives
Thank you.
context.
So, I didn't choose, but it's something that happens, and it happens to a lot of people, actually. And so I'm trying to be positive and grateful as much as I can each day.
Yeah.
And also getting to support and advocacy for Parkinson's disease, for those who are living with Parkinson.
Yeah. Well, hey, we will be lifting you up, and I just pray that our eyes are open. I know pastors and leaders who've come out because of stroke, people who've had heart attacks, things that have changed their life and altered in all kinds of ways. And over none of these things do we preside. And somehow in the midst of all of this, that we have to come to the conclusion that God is still good, and he redeems all of these things. But sometimes walking through them and being in that wilderness season is the difficult part. And so be praying for you and all that, and we'll stay in touch.
Also be well.
All right. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Matt.
So some stories leave you with answers, direction, kind of know what I can do now, but this is not one of them. Dennis's story reminds us that some of life's hardest questions don't get resolved neatly. We can't tie that episode up in 30 minutes and say all is well. Sometimes we don't get the retirement that we planned. Sometimes we don't get the health that we expected. Sometimes we don't get to choose when a chapter ends. And somehow, listening to Dennis, what stands out, I didn't get any bitterness from him. It really is gratitude. He apologized after the interview for being a little bit emotional. He said, it's still hard. And I said, of course. It's not because losses aren't real. They're very real, and he can still have gratitude in the midst of all of that. It becomes a way of seeing something that disease can't touch. He still has love and faith, still has family and friendship, and of course, the presence of God in the midst of all of it. If you are walking through loss right now, whether it's the loss of a role, a dream, your health, or a future that you thought you would have, my prayer is that Dennis's story reminds you that grief and gratitude can occupy and live in the same space. And sometimes hope shows up there too. I encourage you to check out Dennis's book, Choosing Gratitude. You can get it on Amazon and everywhere else you can find a book, and reach out to him. My hope is that our community here in the Life After Ministry podcast, would you just reach out to Dennis and say, I listened and I'm praying for you? Would you, just before you press send, would you pray for him? You can get him at dennisratwood@gmail.com and just send him an encouragement and maybe send him a meal or coffee too. So thanks for listening. This is the Life After Ministry podcast.